and Kirby White are GPs on the front line of the coronavirus pandemic in regional Victoria, and for weeks they've been struggling to get their hands on personal protective equipment. So they've got to work on a solution for hundreds of their peers.
Not having the adequate tools to be able to do our job, it's frustrating. It's like a carpenter not having a hammer.
For months now, Nicole Townsend and Kirby White have been putting their lives on the line at the GP clinic in Bendigo.
Have you been feeling short of breath at all?
Sometimes, yeah.
In February, Nicole and Kirby ordered a supply of personal protective equipment, or PPE, for their clinic, including masks and gowns. 2.5 weeks later, they'd run out, as had their suppliers.
We've been able to secure some masks from the stockpile, but to date we've not received any gowns.
We feel like we're at the end of the line of getting distribution from the government sources.
40 k's down the road in Castlemaine, Dr. Dan Harbison's also struggling to source gowns.
We absolutely were very low. One of the clinics in town ran out completely. So it really is getting to the stage where it's quite dire.
So Nicole and Kirby took matters into their own hands and started sewing their own reusable gowns.
There's 650 general practices in rural and regional Victoria, and so our goal at the moment is to be able to get a box of gowns out to every one of them.
The pair have recruited an army of volunteer sewers to help, including Carol McCook.
I have been self-isolating and the days can be quite long, and you go for your walk and then once you've cleaned your oven, you think, what am I going to do today? And the gown sewing has been just fabulous.
Over the past few weeks, Carol's sewed 16 gowns.
Probably takes nearly 2 hours for me to make one gown because I want to do them very carefully.
Using donations and small grants, Nicole and Kirby have also teamed up with businesses that are out of work due to the pandemic.
We've engaged a manufacturer in Melbourne who was standing workers down previously. Even we've had a bridal shop come to us because there's no weddings, and so their seamstresses are quiet.
To date, the pair have sent out nearly 500 gowns to their peers in regional practices. The gowns will be crucial as we head into winter, when doctors expect coronavirus cases will spike again.
These gowns, they're not single use, so we know that we can use them as long as we can wash them, and that will give us so much more confidence going into the worst of the COVID crisis.
But funding is an issue, and Nicole and Kirby have struggled to get the backing of politicians and some medical bodies, as their design hasn't been approved by the Therapeutic Goods Administration.
There's not enough time to go through the normal process. By the time that's actually done, there's going to have been hundreds of consultations that needed to happen.
In a statement, the Health Department says it's bought gowns and gloves and is distributing them where required for outbreaks. But Nicole and Kirby say GPs can't wait any longer for gowns.
Now is the time where we need to provide protection to the GPs so that they can keep seeing patients.
What a great idea that is from those two volunteers, and I hope that story shames the government into remembering that out in regional Australia, it's often not easy to get this material, and they should get a grant from government immediately.
Yeah, the TGA aspect of it's interesting, isn't it? That they haven't got approval for it, and therefore that sometimes you can have these things that are there to protect you.
Well, as the doctor himself said there, we can reuse these and wash them. I mean, I would rely on the doctor's advice. Get rid of the red tape, and more power to those two. Good on them. That's fantastic.
Amazed to see you advocating getting rid of red tape. Right. It's extraordinary.
If you are watching this and want to support Gowns for Doctors, the initiative, the links page is on our website. All the details are there.
So I think this is a really good example to look at about how it's a identified need that's sort of come about, and then quick action to develop a design solution to deal with this need. Now, the need is an inadequate supply of PPE. Now, yes, they're saying, yeah, they've ordered it, but that doesn't mean that the suppliers are able to keep up with the demand. And so you've got these factories making these plastic gowns for PPE for virus protection from the virus and blah, 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 hygiene, etc. Just because you've ordered it and say, yes, we're doing it, doesn't necessarily mean that whoever's making it, these factories, they may not be able to keep up with the demand of how much is needed right now. And so this is looking at, well, what's another solution? And I mean, obviously a perfect solution would be to not have to just use one and then throw it out straight away every time you have a patient. To be able to wash and reuse, it means that the supply you currently have is an endless supply. if you can wash that and bring it back to its previous level of sanitation and hygiene, then you don't need to keep ordering and keep buying and keep requesting more PPE, more PPE. Whatever you have is your PPE for as long as it's needed to be used over and over and over. So this is clearly a really good idea as a design initiative. Now, I really want you to also think about where it links into different syllabus points. So for example, factors affecting success of innovation. Well, think about timing. This is the right time. It's no one would have really cared about a company designing hospital protective equipment, out of random fabric and stuff, and said, like, just who cares? Like, hospital gowns is not something that's on the top of the radar. Right now it is, and that's where timing is key, and it shows that this is the right time for this particular design initiative. Now, also, I like that you saw that sort of grandma talking about what it's like to be in isolation, and she's in that at-risk age group where she really can't be out in the community, she can't be seeing relatives, etc., etc. So roping in women like that, it doesn't have to be women, it can be men, but people with sewing skills that actually aren't doing much at home. They're quite bored, they don't have a lot to do, they're probably not up in on the Netflix and the Stan like the younger age group are. So, they're looking for things to keep them active and productive, or not necessarily even active, just productive, something to get their mind on something. So having giving people like that a task, I mean, a lot of them would probably not care about the money, it would be a volunteer thing, but it keeps them active, it keeps them busy. So it's a way to actually staff production. So when you look at production costs, obviously they're worried about production costs because they want to be able to give it to doctors, not charge them. And so production costs are an issue because you've got to pay for fabric and stuff. Now, when you also have to pay manufacturers, so pay the people that are sewing them, that really puts your production costs up really high. But roping in people as a possible volunteer option, women like that lady at home who would actually love to spend her day making some cute hospital gowns and being proud of that work and being busy and feeling like she's got a purpose and a sense of something responsible to do. That's a great way to deal with your production costs, because then you don't have to necessarily, it's a voluntary thing, you don't have to pay the person. Also, they talked about looking at businesses that are unable to operate at this time and using the skill set that they normally have. So existing manufacturing companies, they said, like a wedding dress designer, or they've got seamstresses and dressmakers there that aren't doing anything at the moment. This is an example of something that you could divert the role of the business to be something else that's vital at this time. When you can't do your normal business operations, how can we still use the skill set to do something else? And this links into an example I saw on the news a few weeks ago of a pub in, I think it was Ireland, or maybe it was in the UK, like around Manchester or something like that. But this guy who's had this pub in his family for like literally 200 years. It's just like a pub on the corner. But underneath the pub, they have their own distillery, and I think they do their own whiskey, maybe? I think they do whiskey. Yeah, anyway, and it's like a distillery brewery downstairs, and they make their own alcohol down there, and it's sort of been a thing in that town for many, many years, and everyone knows about it. Well, because the pubs are closed, they've completely diverted business operations. They can use their equipment, the same processes, but instead of making alcohol to drink, they're making alcohol-based sanitizer and distributing that instead, because at the moment that is what the need is. So they can continue to use their skill set, use their equipment, use their resources, and use their staff, but to make a different product that is needed now in this economy at this time. So it's all a little bit about public supply and demand, and needs, timing, political issues. They linked to political in that video, talking about how it's not approved yet, and all these things take ages and processes, and they're saying we need to sort of cut through the red tape here a little bit and allow this idea. This idea needs to just happen now. We can't wait. So that is an issue. How can you get designs that kind of have to go through like medical approval, how can you fast track that? Because there are people waiting on PPE right now that can't wait for people to check and do medical approvals and people to read documents and tick things off and have a meeting about it and have a discussion. They need it to just be like, yes, give it to them. They need it. Let's just use that. It's better than nothing, you know. But anyway, and that kind of links into where you can link in legal issues and like legal and ethical issues. Well, ethically, like they just need it. They need it to protect them. But legally, if it hasn't been approved from like the health people or whatever, and it, you know, it can harbour, there's probably needs to be certain policies written on how those gowns have to be cleaned. They probably have to be cleaned in a certain, in a washing machine on a certain type of cycle for a certain amount of time at a certain temperature. With people can't just chuck it in a tub and give it a quick rinse. So there probably has to be procedures written on, if you are going to use a reusable option of a gown, how does it have to be cleaned so that it is adequately cleaned and sanitized for future use. These are things that take time, and the problem is the doctors, I think, are saying, give it to us and let us just use our initiative so that we can just do it, and not worry and just trust us that we know how to clean and sanitize. But yeah, that's where legal kind of comes into it, and it ends up being a bit of a hiccup, let's say, an obstacle to get through, red tape. All right, that'll do. Bye.